putting all these things together, as well as many others, which our own wits will suggest to you, it is impossible but you will freely acknowledge that this unfortunate John Ridd was now in a cloven stick. There was Lorna, my love and life, bound by her duty to that old villain, I mean to her good grandfather, who could now do little mischief, and therefore deserved all praise. Lorna bound, at any rate, by her womanly feelings, if not by sense of duty, to remain in the thick danger, with nobody to protect her, but everybody to covet her, for beauty and position. Here was all the country roused with violent excitement, at the chance of snapping at the Doones, and not only getting tit for tat, but every young man promising his sweetheart a gold chain, and his mother at least a shilling. And here was our own mow yard, better filled than we could remember, and perhaps every sheaf in it destined to be burned or stolen, before we had finished the bread we had baked. Among all these troubles there was, however, or seemed to be, one comfort. Tom Faggus returned from London very proudly and very happily, with a royal pardon in black and white, which everybody admired the more, because no one could read a word of it. The Squire himself acknowledged cheerfully that he could sooner take 50 purses than read a single line of it. Some people indeed went so far as to say that the parchment was made from a sheep Tom had stolen, and that was why it prevaricated so in giving him a character. But I, knowing something by this time of lawyers, was able to contradict them, affirming that the wolf had more than the sheep to do with this matter. For according to our old saying, the 3 learned professions live by roguery on the 3 parts of a man. The doctor mauls our bodies, the parson starves our soul, but the lawyer must be the adroitest knave, for he has to ensnare our minds. Therefore he takes a careful delight in covering his traps and engines with a spread of dead leaf words, whereof himself knows little more than half the way to spell them. But now Tom Faggus, although having wit to gallop away on his strawberry mare with the speed of terror from lawyers, having paid them with money too honest to stop, yet fell into a reckless adventure, ere ever he came home, from which any lawyer would have saved him, although he ought to have needed none beyond common thought for dear Annie. Now I am, and ever have been, so vexed about this story that I cannot tell it pleasantly, as I try to write in general, in my own words and manner. Therefore I will let John Fry, whom I have robbed of another story, to which he was more entitled, and whom I have robbed of many speeches, which he thought very excellent, lest I should grieve any one with his lack of education, the last lack he ever felt, by the by. Now with your good leave, I will allow poor John to tell his tale, in his own words and style, which he has a perfect right to do, having been the first to tell us. For Squire Faggus kept it close, not trusting even Annie with it, or at least she said so, because no man knows much of his sweetheart's tongue until she has borne him a child or 2. Only before John begins his story, this I would say, in duty to him, and in common honesty, that I dare not write down some few of his words, because they are not convenient, for dialect or other causes, and that I cannot find any way of spelling many of the words which I do repeat, so that people not born in Exmoor may know how he pronounced them, even if they could bring their lips and their legs to the proper attitude. And in this I speak advisedly, having observed some 1,000 times that the manner of a man has of spreading his legs, and bending his knees, or stiffening, and even the way he will set his heel, make all the difference in his tone, and time of casting his voice aright, and power of coming home to you. We always liked John's stories, not for any wit in them, but because we laughed at the man rather than the matter. The way he held his head was enough, with his chin fixed hard like a certainty, especially during his biggest lie. Not a sign of a smile in his lips or nose, but a power of not laughing, and his eyes not turning to anybody, unless somebody had too much of it, as young girls always do, and went over the brink of laughter. Thereupon it was good to see John Fry, how he looked gravely first at the laughter, as much as to ask, "What is it now?" Then if the fool went laughing more, as he or she was sure to do upon that dry inquiry, John would look again, to be sure of it, and then at somebody else, to learn whether the laugh had company. Then if he got another grin, all his mirth came out in glory, with a sudden break, and he wiped his lips, and was grave again. Now John, being too much encouraged by the girls, of which I could never break them, came into the house that December evening, with every inch of him full of a tale. Annie saw it, and Lizzie, of course, and even I, in the gloom of great evils, perceived that John was a loaded gun. But I did not care to explode him. Now nothing primed him so hotly as this. If you wanted to hear all John Fry had heard, the surest of all sure ways to it was, to pretend not to care for a word of it. "I went over to Exmoor in the morning," John began from the chimney corner, looking straight at Annie, "for to zee a little calf, Jan, as us couldn't get zee to laze around the house. Missy have got a square fancy for him, for what her have heerd of the brave. Now zit quiet, will you, Miss Zizzy, or a won't goon on no furder. Vain little tale I'll tell you, so be zit quiet. Wool, as I come down here, I see the straight of volks a strapping of the roody. All on 'em with grit goons, or 2 men out of 3 with 'em. Reckon there were 3 score of 'em. Talk small, and beg together likey. Loud around woman and chillers. Some of 'em with matches blowing, toters with flintlocks. What be up now?" I says to Bill Blacksmith, as had knowledge of me. "Be the king a coming? If her be, do 'ee want to shun 'em?" "Thee not now," says Bill Blacksmith, "just the same as I be a telling of it. What a man us expect Tom Faggus and zum of us manes to shut 'em." "Shut 'em without a warrant?" says I. "Sure 'ee knows better nor thick, Bill. A man mayn't shut to another man, without having a warrant." "Bill, was it so zee, last time I zeen 'em, and nothing to the contrary?" "Ha, never fight about that," said Bill, "zame as I be telling you. Us has warrants and worship now, 3 or 4 on 'em, and more nor a dozen warranties, for you I know the contrary. Shut 'em, us manes, and shut 'em, us wills." "Way, Miss Annie, good Lord, whatever makes 'ee so stare so?" "Nothing at all, John," our Annie answered, only the horrible ferocity of that miserable blacksmith.